The Alpha King's lost son was raised by the most feared wolf lord. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's unforgettable story, I have one small favor to ask. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It only takes a moment. It is completely free, and your support helps us continue creating powerful, emotional stories like this one. We are truly grateful for every viewer who joins us on these incredible journeys. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. We always love seeing how our stories connect people across different countries and time zones. Now let us begin today's story. The child the world believed was lost had never been abandoned. He had been hidden until the world became worthy of finding him. 20 years earlier, beneath a sky unlike any recorded in the history of the Wolf Kingdoms, two full moons rose together above the royal citadel. Elders fell to their knees as silver light washed across the mountains, whispering that the ancient prophecy of the first moon had finally awakened. Inside the grand palace, bells rang with joyful celebration as the newborn son of Alpha King Alaric Thornvale took his first breath. Wolves from every allied kingdom gathered to honor the arrival of the future heir, believing the child would one day unite every pack beneath a single banner of peace. Queen Eleanor held her infant close while the tiny boy peacefully slept, completely unaware that his birth had already changed the destiny of the world. The royal elders noticed something extraordinary before sunrise. Resting upon the child's left wrist was a faint silver symbol shaped like a crescent moon, surrounded by delicate ancient markings no living wolf recognized. The oldest historian slowly opened a weathered scroll that had not been touched for generations. His hands trembled as he quietly read the forgotten words aloud. When the first blood returns beneath the twin moons, the child shall carry the mark of unity, and the future of every kingdom shall rest within one innocent heart. Joy quickly turned into concern. Another elder spoke with visible unease. If the old stories are true, others will seek the child before he is old enough to understand his gift. King Alaric stood beside the cradle, his expression calm but thoughtful. Then every wall in this kingdom will protect him. None of them realized the greatest danger would arrive without warning. As midnight approached the following evening, a strange silver mist rolled silently through the mountain forest surrounding the royal citadel. Guards reported seeing unusual lights moving between ancient trees before the mysterious fog swallowed every sound. Deep inside the nursery, the royal nurse gently rocked the sleeping prince while soft moonlight drifted across the room. Suddenly the windows opened beneath an unexpected breeze, though no storm touched the sky. The candles flickered once before quietly extinguishing themselves. When the palace guards finally reached the nursery moments later, the cradle stood empty. There were no broken doors, no signs of struggle, and no footprints leading away from the room. Only the child's small blanket remained, folded carefully inside the cradle as though someone had wished to leave behind a silent promise instead of fear. Panic spread across the kingdom before dawn. Search parties crossed mountains, forests, rivers, and forgotten valleys for weeks without discovering a single clue. Every neighboring alpha pledged support. Messengers traveled farther than any royal search had ever reached. Yet the prince had vanished as completely as morning mist beneath the rising sun. Queen Eleanor spent every evening beside the empty nursery window, hoping she might somehow hear her son's laughter carried back by the wind. King Alaric never allowed anyone to see his grief. But each year he quietly returned alone to the same nursery on the anniversary of his son's disappearance, placing a single white flower beside the empty cradle before leaving in silence. Across the kingdom, the people eventually accepted the heartbreaking belief that the young prince had been lost forever. Far beyond every known border, hidden deep within mountains no royal map dared to name, an imposing figure. Wrapped in a dark cloak, gently carried a sleeping little boy through a peaceful forest illuminated by glowing silver flowers. The child rested safely against the stranger's shoulder, smiling quietly in his dreams. The mysterious guardian looked toward the twin moons before whispering with calm certainty, "Your time will come, little one. Until then, the world must never know where you are." The mysterious guardian carried the sleeping child across narrow mountain paths until the last lights of the Alpha Kingdom disappeared beyond the horizon. Before sunrise, they reached a hidden valley surrounded by towering cliffs that no royal map had ever recorded. Crystal streams flowed peacefully through ancient forests where enormous white trees shimmered beneath silver moonlight, and glowing flowers covered the ground like countless tiny stars. It was a place whispered about only in forgotten legends, a sanctuary where the oldest wolves had once gathered long before kingdoms divided the land. The man finally lowered his hood, revealing a calm but commanding face marked by years of quiet wisdom rather than cruelty. His name was Lord Valar Blackmore, the wolf lord whose reputation had terrified generations of rulers. Throughout every kingdom, parents frightened young wolves with stories of the feared lord who lived beyond the northern mountains. Yet none of those stories spoke of the gentle way he carefully wrapped the little prince in a warm blanket before placing him inside a small wooden cradle he had built with his own hands. Valar looked down at the sleeping child with quiet determination. "From this day forward," he whispered, "you will be known as Kaelin." Years passed like gentle seasons carried by the mountain winds. Kaelin grew into a bright, curious boy who never questioned why his home rested so far from the rest of the world. To him, the hidden valley was simply home. Every morning began before sunrise as Valar patiently taught him how to listen before speaking, how to understand the forest instead of trying to control it, and how true strength always began with protecting those who could not protect themselves. Instead of lessons about conquest or dominance, Kaelin learned how to care for injured birds, rescue frightened animals caught beneath fallen branches, and plant young trees wherever old ones had fallen. Whenever he asked why these small acts mattered, Valar always gave the same answer. A wolf who cannot protect life is never worthy of leading it. One spring afternoon, while exploring the edge of the valley, Kaelin discovered a tiny fox trapped beneath the roots of a fallen tree after a heavy rainstorm. Without hesitation, he carefully lifted the lighter branches, speaking softly until the frightened animal calmed enough to crawl free. Rather than running away immediately, the little fox paused and gently brushed against his hand before disappearing into the forest. Valar had watched the entire moment from a nearby ridge without making his presence known. A quiet smile appeared across his face. The boy had acted exactly as he hoped, not because someone expected it, but because kindness had become part of his nature. That evening, while preparing dinner together beside a warm stone fireplace, Kaelin looked curiously toward the distant southern sky, where faint lights occasionally shimmered beyond the mountains. "Are there other wolves out there?" he asked. Valar carefully stirred the soup before answering. "Yes." "Have I ever met them?" "Not yet." Kaelin considered that answer for a moment. "Will I someday?" Valar looked into the dancing firelight, his expression thoughtful. "When the time is right, the truth will find you." Although the answer satisfied the boy for now, Valar quietly understood that the peaceful years were beginning to slip away. Deep inside a hidden chamber beneath his stone home rested an ancient silver flame that had burned continuously for centuries. That night, for the first time since Kaelin arrived in the valley as an infant, the sacred moon flame flickered unexpectedly before growing brighter than ever before. Valar immediately recognized the warning. Somewhere beyond the mountains, something ancient had begun searching for the child whose destiny could no longer remain hidden forever. Its brilliant silver light reflected across the stone walls of the hidden sanctuary, casting gentle waves of moonlight that danced through the chamber like living stars. Lord Valar Blackmore stood silently before the sacred moon flame, studying every movement of the ancient fire with growing concern. For centuries, the flame had remained perfectly calm, responding only when the balance between the wolf kingdoms and the oldest powers of the first moon began to shift. Never before had it burned so brightly without warning. Valar closed his eyes for a brief moment, placing one hand above the silver flame. Instead of heat, he felt a quiet pulse flowing through the air, as though the flame itself had recognized someone beyond the sanctuary. "The time is approaching," he whispered softly. Above the chamber, unaware of the ancient warning, Kaelin spent the afternoon repairing a wooden footbridge that crossed one of the valley's crystal streams. Several young wolves from the hidden settlement laughed together while carrying fresh lumber, but Kaelin insisted on finishing the final section himself because an elderly couple used the bridge every morning to reach their small orchard. One little girl watched him tighten the last wooden support before smiling brightly. You always fix everything before anyone asks. Kalen smiled back as he stepped down from the bridge. It is easier to repair something before it breaks completely. The child thoughtfully nodded, quietly remembering his words. Later that day, while walking deeper into the forest to gather herbs for the village healer, Kalen heard a frightened whimper carried by the gentle wind. Following the sound, he discovered a young white wolf resting beneath a fallen tree. The animal was not trapped, but it appeared exhausted after wandering far from its family. Kalen slowly knelt several feet away, speaking in a calm voice until the frightened wolf relaxed enough to approach him. He offered fresh water from a nearby spring and patiently waited until the young wolf regained enough strength to stand. As the animal gently brushed against his arm, something extraordinary happened. The faint silver mark hidden beneath the sleeve of Kalen's left wrist suddenly began glowing with soft moonlight. Tiny streams of silver light spread across his skin before fading almost as quickly as they had appeared. Startled, Kalen instinctively pulled back his sleeve, staring at the mysterious symbol that had never behaved this way before. The young wolf looked at him for several quiet seconds before running gracefully toward the northern hills. High above the valley, Lord Valor had witnessed everything from a distant overlook. His expression remained calm, but his heart grew heavy with understanding. The first blood mark had awakened. The peaceful years were ending exactly as the oldest prophecies had foretold. That evening, after the valley settled into peaceful silence, Valor invited Kalen to join him beside the sacred moon flame for the first time. The young man had always known the hidden chamber existed, but he had never been allowed to enter. As he stepped inside, the silver fire immediately brightened, illuminating the ancient carvings that covered every wall. Kalen looked around in quiet amazement. "What is this place?" he asked softly. Valor watched the flame instead of answering immediately. "It is older than every kingdom that exists today." Kalen slowly approached the ancient fire, feeling an unexpected warmth rather than heat. "Why have you never shown it to me before?" Valor finally turned toward him, his voice calm but filled with quiet emotion. "Because I hoped you could live your entire life without needing to know why you came here." Before Kalen could ask another question, the sacred moon flame suddenly rose higher than ever before, forming the image of a silver crescent suspended above the fire. At the same moment, hundreds of miles away inside the royal citadel, an enormous ancient mirror hidden beneath the Hall of Kings awakened after 20 years of silence. Upon its crystal surface appeared only one image: a young man standing before a silver flame with the unmistakable first blood mark glowing upon his wrist. King Alaric Thornvale stood motionless before the ancient mirror as its silver surface continued shimmering with the image of the unknown young man. The chamber remained completely silent. Around him, the oldest royal elders stared in disbelief, unable to look away from the unmistakable symbol glowing upon the stranger's wrist. Elder Rowan, the kingdom's chief historian, slowly approached the mirror with trembling hands. He carefully opened a weathered volume bound in white leather, turning directly to a page few living wolves had ever seen. After comparing the ancient illustration with the glowing mark inside the mirror, he quietly closed the book. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "there is no mistake. That is the first blood mark carried only by your son." Alaric never took his eyes from the reflection. For 20 years, he had imagined countless possibilities. Perhaps the child had perished. Perhaps he had been taken beyond the sea. Perhaps the moon goddess had simply called him home. Never had he dared believe his son might still be alive. The king slowly stepped closer until his fingertips nearly touched the glowing surface. The young man inside the vision looked peaceful, standing before an unfamiliar silver flame with quiet confidence instead of fear. "Where is he?" Alaric asked softly. Elder Rowan shook his head. "The mirror reveals only truth, never location." Before another word could be spoken, the image shifted. Behind the young man appeared a tall figure wrapped in a dark cloak. Although the stranger's face remained partially hidden, every elder recognized him instantly from ancient paintings preserved within the royal archives. A heavy silence filled the chamber. "Lord Valor Blackmore," one advisor murmured. Several younger nobles immediately exchanged uneasy glances. Throughout the kingdoms, his name had become synonymous with mystery, exile, and unimaginable strength. Stories claimed he ruled forgotten lands beyond the northern mountains where no alpha dared travel. Yet the figure inside the mirror displayed no cruelty. He simply rested one calm hand upon the young man's shoulder with the quiet reassurance of a father guiding a son. The vision slowly faded, leaving only rippling silver light behind. Alaric turned toward the assembled council with calm determination. "Prepare a royal expedition." One elder immediately stepped forward. "Your Majesty, Blackmoor is forbidden territory. No Alpha King has entered those mountains in hundreds of years." Alaric nodded. "Then perhaps it is time someone did." Another advisor lowered his voice with concern. "The Wolf Lord is feared for a reason." The king answered without hesitation. "Fear often grows where truth has been forgotten." Hundreds of miles away, the hidden valley welcomed another peaceful sunrise. Kalen rose before dawn as usual and carried fresh water to several elderly villagers whose cottages rested near the northern cliffs. Along the way, he greeted children by name, repaired a broken fence without being asked, and stopped to help a shepherd gather several wandering sheep before continuing his morning walk. Every person smiled warmly when they saw him. No one treated him as royalty. They simply trusted him because he had spent his entire life earning that trust through countless quiet acts of kindness. From a nearby hillside, Lord Vaylor watched silently, pride mixed with quiet sadness in his eyes. The young man had become everything he had hoped, yet the peaceful life they had built together was nearing its end. As Kalen returned toward the village carrying baskets of fresh herbs, he noticed Vaylor waiting beside the old stone bridge overlooking the Crystal River. The Wolf Lord rarely interrupted his daily routine unless something important had changed. Kalen smiled as he approached. "You look as though you have been expecting someone." Vaylor looked toward the distant southern mountains where dark clouds gathered beyond the horizon. His voice remained calm, but each word carried the quiet certainty of someone who had long accepted an unavoidable truth. "I have," he answered, "and I believe your father has finally begun the journey that will bring him here." Kalen stood quietly beside the old stone bridge, unable to speak for several moments after hearing Lord Vaylor's words. The gentle sound of the Crystal River continued flowing beneath them, as though the valley itself remained untouched by the truth that had just entered his life. Finally, he looked toward the older man who had raised him since childhood. "My father?" he asked softly. Vaylor nodded once. "Yes." Kalen searched his face for signs of uncertainty, but found only calm honesty. "You always told me the truth would find me when the time was right." Vaylor slowly rested one hand upon the weathered stone railing. "And now it has." They walked together through the quiet valley as the golden light of late afternoon settled across the mountains. Children laughed while chasing butterflies through wildflower fields. Elders tended orchards planted decades earlier, and white wolves rested peacefully beneath ancient trees. Every familiar sight reminded Vaylor how carefully he had protected this peaceful life for 20 years. At last they reached a quiet overlook where the entire hidden valley could be seen below. Kalen looked across the place he had always called home before asking the question that had quietly lived inside his heart for years. "Who am I?" Vaylor did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the distant southern mountains hidden beyond layers of morning mist. "You are the same young man you were yesterday," he replied gently. "Kind, honest, compassionate. Nothing about your heart has changed." Kalen smiled faintly. "But my story has." Vaylor finally met his eyes. "Yes, it has." Before another word could be spoken, a young shepherd hurried up the hillside carrying a carved wooden staff. "Lord Vaylor," he called respectfully, "travelers have reached the southern pass." Vaylor quietly closed his eyes for a brief moment. The journey he had expected for 2 decades had finally arrived. "Thank you," he answered calmly. "Please tell everyone there is no cause for fear." The young shepherd nodded before returning toward the village. Kalen looked toward the distant mountain pass, where small figures slowly appeared against the fading sunlight. "Are they from the kingdoms beyond the mountains?" Vaylor nodded. "The Alpha King has come." Meanwhile, King Alaric Thornvale guided his small royal party along the final mountain trail leading toward the hidden valley. Contrary to the advice of many elders, he had brought only a handful of trusted companions instead of an army. Elder Rowan rode beside him, quietly observing the peaceful landscape surrounding them. "Your Majesty," he said thoughtfully, "if Lord Vaylor intended us harm, we would never have reached this place. Alaric looked across the untouched forests, crystal streams, and flourishing meadows stretching beneath the cliffs. There were no signs of ruined villages or frightened people. Instead, every home appeared carefully maintained, every field healthy, every path welcoming. The kingdom described by fearful legends looked remarkably peaceful. As they crossed the final ridge, the hidden valley unfolded before them like a forgotten paradise preserved by time itself. Villagers continued their daily work without panic, greeting one another with warm smiles while children played freely beside the river. Standing quietly at the center of the valley beside the old stone bridge was Lord Valar Blackmore. His dark cloak moved gently in the mountain breeze as he waited without drawing a weapon or issuing a challenge. Beside him stood the young man from the ancient mirror. The moment King Alaric saw Caelan's face, time itself seemed to stand still. Although 20 years had passed, he immediately recognized the same gentle eyes that had once looked up at him from a royal cradle beneath the light of the twin moons. Before any greeting could be spoken, Valar calmly broke the silence with words that echoed across the peaceful valley. "Welcome, Alpha King. You have arrived exactly 20 years later than you wished, but precisely when destiny intended." For several quiet moments, no one moved. The mountain breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers through the hidden valley as King Alaric Thornvale and Caelan looked at one another across the old stone bridge. Neither spoke first. Neither rushed forward. 20 years of unanswered questions stood silently between them. At last, Alaric stepped down from his horse and slowly approached on foot, leaving his royal cloak behind as a sign that he had come not as a ruler demanding answers, but as a father searching for truth. Caelan remained beside Lord Valar Blackmore, his heart filled with curiosity rather than fear. He had imagined many possibilities after learning he had another family, somewhere beyond the mountains, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Alaric stopped several feet away and gently lowered his head in respect before speaking. "My name is Alaric Thornvale." Caelan smiled politely. "I know." The young man hesitated before continuing. "Lord Valar told me you were searching for someone." Alaric nodded slowly. "For 20 years. Silence settled again until Valar calmly stepped forward. "The time has come for every hidden truth to be spoken." He turned toward Caelan with the quiet expression of a man who had carried the same burden for decades. "The night you disappeared from the royal citadel was not an accident. A secret order known as the Ancient Cult had already discovered the first blood mark upon your wrist. They believed the child carrying that mark would one day awaken a power they wished to control. Before they could reach you, I took you from the palace." Caelan listened carefully, trying to understand a past he had never known. "You saved me." Valar answered with complete honesty. "I protected you." King Alaric looked toward the Wolf Lord with deep emotion. Why did no one ever know? Valar's calm eyes reflected years of quiet sacrifice. Because the moment anyone discovered where you were, the ancient cult would have found you as well. They searched every kingdom for years. The safest place was the one everyone feared. Elder Rowan quietly lowered his head, finally understanding why every rumor surrounding Blackmore had spread so easily. Fear had become the perfect shield. Caelan slowly looked around the peaceful valley where he had spent his entire life. Every lesson, every shared meal, every morning beside the crystal stream suddenly carried new meaning. He turned back toward Valar. "You never tried to make me hate them." Valar smiled gently. "Because hatred would have stolen the future I hoped you would build." Alaric's eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "You raised my son with more wisdom than many kings could have given." Valar shook his head softly. "I simply gave him the chance to become himself." At that moment, several village children ran across the nearby meadow carrying baskets filled with fresh apples they had gathered for the elderly families before winter arrived. One little girl happily waved at Caelan. "Will you still help us repair the orchard fence tomorrow?" Caelan laughed warmly. "Of course I will." King Alaric watched the simple exchange in thoughtful silence. No royal tutor could have taught compassion more effectively than the life his son had lived here. For the first time since entering the valley, he understood that he had not truly lost 20 years. Someone else had faithfully protected them for him. The setting sun painted the mountains with golden light as Valar quietly looked toward the distant northern peaks. "There is still one truth you do not know," he said. "The first blood mark was never meant to create another king. It was meant to unite those who had forgotten they were once one family. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the sacred moon flame hidden beneath the valley suddenly flared brighter than ever before, sending a brilliant silver beam into the evening sky that illuminated the ancient mountains beyond, where a forgotten temple slowly awakened after centuries of silence. The brilliant silver beam continued shining above the hidden valley long after sunset, illuminating the distant mountains with a radiance that no one present had ever witnessed. Every villager quietly gathered outside their homes, gazing toward the northern peaks where the forgotten temple now stood outlined beneath the moonlight. King Alaric Thornvale, Lord Valar Blackmore, and Kaelin remained together near the old stone bridge, each understanding that the peaceful reunion they had imagined had become part of something far greater than themselves. Elder Rowan slowly approached the glowing horizon, his weathered face filled with awe. "The Temple of the First Moon," he whispered. "Our oldest records claimed it disappeared before the First Kingdoms were ever founded." Valar calmly nodded. "It never disappeared. It waited." Kaelin looked toward the distant mountains with quiet curiosity. "Waited for what?" Valar answered without hesitation. "For the one carrying the first blood mark to choose compassion before power." Those words lingered in the evening air as several villagers continued preparing food for travelers who had unexpectedly arrived from the Southern Kingdom. No one asked whether they belonged to one pack or another. They simply shared bread, warm soup, and shelter because that was how the valley had always lived. King Alaric quietly watched the simple acts unfolding around him. He realized that everything he had hoped to teach his son already existed here, not inside a palace, but within an ordinary community built upon kindness. A small boy accidentally dropped a basket of apples near the orchard path. Before anyone else reacted, both Alaric and Kaelin instinctively bent down to gather the fruit at the same time. Their hands briefly reached for the same apple, and both smiled with quiet surprise. Elder Rowan observed the moment with gentle satisfaction. "Some things are carried in blood," he murmured. "Others are carried in the heart." Kaelin handed the final apple back to the grateful child before turning toward Alaric. "Lord Valar always said a leader notices small problems before they become large ones." Alaric smiled warmly. "My father taught me exactly the same lesson." For the first time since meeting, neither of them spoke as strangers. They simply walked side by side through the valley, helping repair a damaged garden fence that strong winds had loosened earlier that afternoon. No royal ceremony announced their growing connection. No prophecy demanded it. Trust quietly formed through shared actions rather than dramatic words. As night settled across the valley, Valar led both of them toward the entrance of the hidden sanctuary beneath the mountain, where the sacred moon flame continued burning with unusual brilliance. The ancient silver fire reflected across the chamber walls until a circle of forgotten symbols slowly awakened around the altar. One by one, the carvings illuminated, revealing a map unlike any kingdom had ever recorded. Instead of borders separating territories, the glowing lines connected every ancient pack through a single path leading toward the Temple of the First Moon. Elder Rowan carefully traced the symbols with his eyes before reading an inscription that had remained hidden for centuries. "The heir shall not inherit a throne. The heir shall restore the path." Complete silence followed those words. Kaelin quietly looked toward both men who had shaped his life in different ways. "If that path belongs to all wolves," he asked softly, "then no kingdom can walk it alone." Valar's calm expression slowly became a proud smile. "That is the answer the temple has waited generations to hear." At that exact moment, the silver beam stretching toward the northern mountains divided into countless streams of light that spread across the night sky, and deep within the awakened Temple of the First Moon, a pair of enormous white stone guardians slowly opened their eyes for the first time in 1,000 years, recognizing that the true journey had finally begun. Before dawn painted the mountains with gold, Kaelin, King Alaric Thornvale, Lord Valar Blackmore, and Elder Rowan began their journey toward the Temple of the First Moon. The narrow trail climbed through towering cliffs covered with ancient white pines whose branches shimmered beneath lingering moonlight. None of them spoke for a long time. The peaceful silence itself felt sacred, as though the mountains remembered footsteps taken thousands of years before. Along the path, Crystal streams crossed polished stones engraved with symbols no modern kingdom still understood. Every few hundred feet, towering statues of wolves carved from luminous white rock stood facing the northern horizon with quiet dignity. Their expressions carried neither anger nor triumph, only watchful patience. Elder Rowan carefully examined one of the weathered carvings before smiling with amazement. These guardians are older than every royal record preserved inside the Alpha Kingdom. Valor nodded calmly, because they were built before wolves divided themselves into kingdoms. As the group continued climbing, Kalen noticed something extraordinary. Birds landed fearlessly upon the ancient statues, while deer calmly crossed the trail without fleeing from their presence. The entire mountain seemed untouched by fear, as though every living creature recognized the place as a sanctuary rather than forbidden ground. Several hours later, they reached a vast stone courtyard surrounded by 12 towering columns carved with silver crescent symbols that glowed softly beneath the morning sky. At the center stood the Temple of the First Moon, magnificent yet remarkably simple, built from white stone that reflected both sunlight and moonlight at the same time. The enormous entrance remained closed, guarded by 2 towering wolf statues whose silver eyes quietly shimmered with life. As Kalen stepped forward, the first blood mark upon his wrist began glowing once again. Gentle silver light spread across the courtyard instead of overwhelming brilliance, illuminating forgotten inscriptions hidden beneath centuries of dust. The ancient stone guardians slowly lowered their heads in silent recognition before the great temple doors opened without a single sound. Warm silver light flowed from within, filling the mountain air with a peaceful calm unlike anything any of them had ever experienced. They entered together. Inside the temple stretched a circular sanctuary whose ceiling opened directly toward the heavens, allowing both the fading moon and rising sun to shine upon a single white altar resting at its center. Around the sanctuary stood countless empty stone seats arranged in perfect harmony rather than hierarchy. There was no throne, no royal platform, no place set above another. Elder Rowan looked around in astonishment. There is no king's seat. Valor smiled gently, because those who built this sanctuary believed wisdom should be shared before power was claimed. As Kalen approached the altar, the silver mark upon his wrist brightened until delicate streams of light connected the altar with every empty seat surrounding the chamber. A calm feminine voice echoed softly throughout the sanctuary, carrying warmth that reached every heart present. The first blood was never given to create rulers above others. It was entrusted to awaken unity among those who forgot they belonged together. King Alaric quietly lowered his head. For years he had believed destiny meant preparing his son to inherit a crown. Now he realized the greatest inheritance was never a kingdom, but the opportunity to heal divisions that had endured for centuries. Kalen slowly turned toward both the father who had searched for him and the guardian who had raised him. "Then I cannot walk this path alone," he said quietly. Valor's expression reflected quiet pride, while Alaric smiled with peaceful understanding. At that very moment, a hidden chamber beneath the altar awakened, revealing an ancient map formed entirely from living silver light. Beyond every known kingdom, far across an unexplored northern sea, one final glowing symbol suddenly appeared where no map had ever placed a land before, suggesting that the oldest secret of the moon goddess still waited beyond the edge of the known world. Morning sunlight slowly spread across the Temple of the First Moon as Kalen stood quietly before the ancient map formed from living silver light. The glowing symbol beyond the northern sea continued shining with a gentle brilliance, reminding everyone present that even the oldest stories had not yet revealed every truth. For several peaceful moments, no one spoke. King Alaric Thornvale looked toward his son with gratitude rather than expectation. He had crossed mountains believing he might reclaim the heir he had lost. Instead, he had discovered a young man who already possessed everything a father could hope for. Compassion had become Kalen's greatest strength long before anyone called him a prince. Lord Valor Blackmore quietly stepped beside the ancient altar, his calm expression reflecting the peaceful fulfillment of a promise carried for 2 decades. "The first moon has spoken," he said gently. "The path before you is yours to choose." Kalen slowly looked from the father who had never stopped searching to the guardian who had never stopped protecting him. If I return only as a prince, he answered thoughtfully, then nothing truly changes. The kingdoms remain separated. Fear remains stronger than understanding. Elder Rowan nodded with quiet admiration. Then what will you choose? Kalen smiled softly as sunlight and moonlight met across the white stone floor. I will choose the path that belongs to everyone. The silver light surrounding the ancient map immediately brightened. The calm feminine voice returned one final time, filling the sanctuary with warmth instead of command. The first blood has fulfilled its purpose. A true heir does not inherit peace. A true heir creates it. The glowing lines upon the map slowly expanded, connecting every kingdom through streams of silver light until no border remained isolated from another. King Alaric quietly approached Lord Valor. Without hesitation, the Alpha King placed one hand over his heart before bowing respectfully. No words can repay what you have done for my son. Valor returned the gesture with equal respect. He was never mine to keep. He was only mine to protect until the world was ready. Alaric smiled with sincere gratitude. Then you have given me the greatest gift a father could receive. You allowed my son to become a man whose heart is greater than any crown. Together they walked back toward the hidden valley where villagers welcomed them not with royal ceremonies, but with warm smiles, shared meals, and simple laughter. That evening, beneath a sky filled with countless stars, Kalen stood upon the familiar stone bridge where his journey had quietly changed forever. Children continued playing beside the crystal river while elders prepared lanterns for the coming festival. Nothing about the valley had changed, yet everything felt new. Kalen looked toward both men standing beside him. One of you gave me life, he said gently. The other taught me how to live it. I will always honor both. Neither father answered with grand speeches. Instead, they simply stood together beneath the rising moon, understanding that love had already spoken more clearly than words ever could. As the first festival lantern floated into the night sky, similar lights unexpectedly began appearing far beyond the mountains as villages across distant kingdoms unknowingly celebrated beneath the same moon. Hope quietly traveled farther than any messenger. Deep beyond the unexplored northern sea, where the final silver symbol continued glowing upon the ancient map, an immense island hidden within shimmering mist slowly emerged beneath the moonlight. At its highest peak stood a solitary white tree whose branches suddenly bloomed with silver leaves for the first time in 1,000 years, quietly waiting for the day the heir who united hearts would continue the journey that had only just begun.